So I think I'm going to say a few words about the Chinese. Last year, I did my first Heritage Fair on Chinese immigration. It was an eye-opening experience. At first, I didn't have a clue what the Chinese did to immigrate to Canada. What I learned, I could not believe actually happened. Hi, my name is Nicholas Marr, and today I will share what I learned about Chinese immigration to Canada. In the late 1800s, China was having many civil war rebellions, such as the Taiping Rebellion or the Boxer Rebellion. There was also a food famine, floodings, little law and order, and scarce farmland. The people of China were poor and starving and wanted better lives. They had heard rumors about Gold Mountain in North America and went over to California and Barkerville, British Columbia, to seek gold in order to support their families back in China. Very few made it back to China rich because they did not find much gold, but there was still hope. In 1881, the Canadian government was desperate to build a railway across Canada to connect British Columbia to the rest of Canada in a short amount of time. If not built, BC would not be part of Confederation. The Canadian government wanted to do it by themselves and use their own labor, but they soon realized it was not possible. So they asked the Chinese to help them. They offered the Chinese only $1 a day with no food or supplies, while the others would receive $1.50 to $2 with food and supplies. Since the Chinese were so desperate for money, they took the jobs. They gave the Chinese the most dangerous, riskiest jobs, like blasting through mountains with dynamite to open up the channels for the trade. Many Chinese lives were lost. After the railway was finished in 1885, the Canadian government didn't need or want the Chinese in Canada anymore. The Canadian government was worried about the economic and cultural impacts of the Chinese workers. But the Chinese were still desperate for money, so they continued to immigrate to Canada, taking jobs for less money than others. The Canadian government wanted to protect its people, so they put up a head tax of $50, hoping to drive the Chinese back to China. The Chinese were willing to pay the head tax in order to make a better life for the family. So in 1900, the Canadian government raised it to $100. But the Chinese were still willing to pay. They knew that the life in Canada was better than back in China. Finally, they raised it to $500. But that didn't stop them. The Canadian government finally created an Exclusion Act, which banned most Chinese immigration to Canada. The Chinese Exclusion Act was in place for 24 years. In 1939, when World War II started, the Chinese thought this was their chance to prove to Canada that they were loyal to the country and should be allowed to immigrate to Canada. And so they fought. And in 1947, the Chinese Exclusion Act was repealed and Chinese immigration was allowed. But unfortunately, the damage was already done. It had been 24 years since the families had reunited. The part of the family in China had kept to the Chinese customs, while in Canada, the fathers had adapted to the Canadian ways. When the families reunited, they didn't feel like a family. It felt like living with strangers. The Canada's actions destroyed most of the important thing to the Chinese, family. In 2006, Prime Minister Stephen Harper apologized in the House of Commons to head taxpayers, their families, and the Chinese Canadian community. Today, the Chinese have been fully integrated into Canadian culture. Back during the Exclusion Act, the Chinese were discriminated and kept to themselves in Chinatown. Now the Chinese live in Richmond, Shaughnessy, East End, West End, downtown, everywhere. Many of the young Chinese have never felt discrimination and feel welcome and are successful in Canada. And I would like to say thanks to our Chinese ancestors who sacrificed so much. Thank you.